The sky is heavy with sorrow, grey clouds looming over rows of silent soldiers. Raindrops mix with fallen tears as a flag-draped coffin rests beneath the weight of a nation's grief. But among them, one mourner does not understand the finality of death. A dog, his leash pulled taut, his body trembling with desperation. Rex whimpers, claws scraping against the wet earth, his eyes locked onto the coffin, his soldier, his partner, his whole world, gone. He lets out a howl, raw and broken, a sound of loss so deep that even the hardened men around him lower their heads. But no matter how much he cries, Logan Carter will never return, and Rex is left behind. The rain fell in soft, relentless waves, soaking into the earth and leaving dark patches on the grass. It drummed softly against the polished mahogany of the coffin, mixing with the hushed whispers and the occasional muffled sobs of the gathered mourners. The American flag lay draped across the surface, its stars and stripes slightly damp, but still standing bold against the grey, overcast sky. Among the rows of uniformed soldiers, standing stiff and silent, there was one figure that refused to accept the finality of death. Rex strained against his leash, his powerful muscles trembling as he fought against the restraint. His paws dug into the wet ground, claws scraping against the earth as he let out a deep, desperate whimper. His ears pinned back, his amber eyes locked onto the coffin, searching, pleading for some sign of movement. Nothing. The dog let out another whimper, then a frustrated growl, snapping his head left and right as if someone, anyone, could give him answers. His handler tightened his grip on the leash, whispering quiet reassurances, but Rex was beyond reach. He was a soldier without orders, a warrior abandoned by his commander. Then, in one swift motion, he lunged forward. The leash jerked taut, his entire body straining against it, his nails scraping the concrete beneath the canopy of the funeral tent. A few soldiers shifted, startled by the sudden burst of motion, but Rex didn't care. His world had collapsed, and all that remained was the overwhelming need to reach Logan, the need to bring him back. But no matter how hard he fought, he could not win against death. A brother's distance. A few feet away, Ethan Carter stood stiffly, hands buried deep in the pockets of his hoodie. His fingers curled into fists, nails digging into his palms, though his face remained blank. He refused to look at the coffin. He refused to cry. The words from the priest blurred together in his mind, a droning murmur that held no meaning. People talked about duty, about sacrifice, about how Logan had died a hero. Ethan clenched his teeth. A hero. Was that supposed to make it better? Was that supposed to bring him back? He wanted to feel something, anger, sorrow, anything, but instead, all he felt was numb. Margaret Carter, his mother, stood beside him, her body racked with silent sobs, clutching a damp tissue between shaking fingers. Frank Carter, their father, stood like stone, his jaw locked so tightly that his cheek twitched. His uniform, the same one he had worn countless times throughout his own years in the military, was crisp and pressed. But his eyes held the weight of a man who had seen too much loss. Ethan hated it. He hated the stiff formality of it all. The way people whispered condolences, like they understood what it meant to lose Logan. The way his father stood there, composed, as if this was just another ceremony. Another obligation to fulfill. This wasn't supposed to happen. Logan was supposed to come back. Instead, all they had was a folded flag and an empty seat at the dinner table. A dog's instincts. Rex stopped struggling. His breathing came in sharp, uneven pants, his chest heaving with exertion. He was exhausted, but his eyes never wavered from the coffin. Then suddenly he tensed. A low, guttural growl rumbled in his chest. His ears shot forward, his body going rigid. He turned sharply, his gaze scanning the faces around him. His eyes locked onto the soldiers, standing closest to Logan's casket, his old unit. A deep, unrelenting snarl erupted from him, his lips pulling back to reveal sharp, white teeth. The men froze. "Whoa, easy, buddy. one of the soldiers murmured, stepping back slightly. Another shifted uncomfortably, glancing at the others. "What's wrong with him?" Rex's growl only grew louder, his body crouching slightly, his stance predatory. His tail stood stiff, unmoving. His nostrils flared as he took in the scent of the men before him, his mind calculating, analyzing, searching. Something was wrong. His entire life, Rex had been trained to trust these men, to fight beside them, to protect them, but now his instincts screamed at him to stay alert, to watch them closely. The handler holding his leash spoke firmly, yanking slightly to get his attention. "Rex, stand down." For a long moment, he did not. But then finally his ears flicked back, his tail lowered slightly, and he turned away. He sat down, but his muscles remained coiled like a spring, ready to launch at any moment. His amber eyes lingered on the men once more before he let out a deep, unsettled huff. Ethan, watching from the sidelines, noticed it all, and for the first time that day he felt something other than numbness. Left behind. The ceremony concluded and people began to disperse. Soldiers offered their final salutes, a few placing their hands briefly on the coffin before stepping away. Logan Carter was gone, and now life had to move forward. But Rex refused to leave. When the handler turned to guide him away, the dog planted his feet firmly against the ground. He let out a low, distressed whimper, his body trembling slightly. His tail curled tight against his back leg, a sign of uncertainty. The handler gave another gentle tug. "Come on, Rex. It's time to go." Rex didn't move. His eyes remained locked on the coffin, his ears pinned back and his entire body drooped. He let out another soft, pitiful sound, a sound of absolute loss. Ethan felt a sharp pang in his chest. He had seen people cry, had heard their voices shake with grief, but nothing compared to the sound of a dog mourning his fallen master. For the first time since Logan's death, Ethan felt like he couldn't breathe. A voice broke through his haze. "Ethan!" his mother whispered, her voice raw. He looked up. "Call him," she urged. His mouth felt dry, his limbs felt heavy. He didn't want to, didn't think it would make a difference, but something inside him compelled him to try. He swallowed hard, then, hesitantly, he spoke. "Rex." The dog stiffened slightly. His ears twitched. Ethan took a shaky step forward, then another. "Come here, buddy." Rex turned his head slowly. His amber eyes locked onto Ethan's, searching, recognizing. For a moment nothing happened. Then, with a shuddering breath, Rex took a step forward. Then another, and then he was at Ethan's side, pressing his cold, wet nose against his palm. Ethan let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. The handler, watching the exchange, exhaled in relief. "Looks like you're the only one he'll listen to." Margaret Carter looked at Ethan, her eyes still filled with tears. "Maybe we should bring him home." Ethan didn't know what to say. He didn't even know what he felt. But as he curled his fingers into Rex's thick fur, feeling the warmth of something living, something real, something Logan had once cherished, he realized for the first time that maybe he wasn't as alone as he thought. Rex had lost his partner. Ethan had lost his brother. Maybe, just maybe, they could find a way forward together. Even in grief, even in loss, neither of them had to be left behind. The desert stretched endlessly before them, an unforgiving landscape of dust and heat. The air shimmered with waves of rising warmth, distorting the view of the distant mountains. The sun bore down mercilessly, pressing against the backs of the soldiers as they moved in formation through the barren terrain. Logan Carter wiped the sweat from his brow and adjusted his grip on his rifle. The weight of his gear was nothing new, but today an unease settled in his chest that he couldn't shake. He turned his head slightly to glance at the figure trotting ahead of him, Rex, his loyal partner. The German shepherd moved with careful precision, his powerful frame tensed, nose close to the ground as he sniffed the air. His ears twitched, his sharp amber eyes constantly scanning the environment. Rex was trained for moments like these, when silence felt too heavy, when the wind carried something unseen but undeniable. Logan knew better than to ignore it. He stole a glance at his unit moving alongside him. The tension was unspoken but present, a collective wariness that came with experience. They had been deployed in Afghanistan for months, long enough to understand that the most dangerous moments were the ones that felt too quiet. Then Rex stopped. His body stiffened. His ears snapped forward. His tail rose slightly, a silent signal that Logan knew all too well. Something was wrong. A warning ignored. Logan immediately raised his fist, signaling for the unit to halt. He moved toward Rex, watching as the dog's nostrils flared, his eyes locked onto a patch of uneven ground just ahead. "Rex senses something," Logan said, voice low. A few soldiers exchanged glances. They had all learned to trust the dog's instincts. He had saved them more times than they could count. But then came the voice of authority. "Keep moving," Derek Cole ordered, his tone sharp. Logan turned, frowning. "Rex has never been wrong before. We should check the area first." "We have a mission to complete," Derek cut him off. His expression was unreadable beneath the shadow of his helmet. "That dog is just paranoid. There's nothing here." Logan hesitated. His gut screamed at him, but orders were orders. He exhaled sharply, then turned back to Rex, who still hadn't moved. Logan reached down, running a gloved hand over the dog's head, whispering a reassurance neither of them truly believed. Then he gestured forward. "Go on, boy." For the first time in his service, Rex hesitated. The dog let out a low, uncertain whimper before cautiously stepping forward. The ground beneath his paw shifted slightly, and then the world exploded. Chaos and fire. The deafening roar of an IED detonation shattered the stillness, sending a massive plume of sand and debris skyward. Logan barely had time to react before the force of the blast lifted him off his feet and threw him backward. Pain exploded through his body as he crashed into the ground. His vision blurred, his ears ringing with the sheer force of the explosion. His lungs burned from the dust that filled the air, choking every breath. Somewhere in the chaos, gunfire erupted. Logan forced himself to move. His arms trembled as he pushed himself up, his rifle half buried in the sand beside him. Through the haze, he saw movement, insurgents emerging from behind ruined buildings, opening fire. His team was under attack. And then Rex, the German shepherd, lay sprawled on the ground, his body still, his chest barely rising. Logan's stomach clenched, his entire world narrowed to that single sight. Ignoring the pain screaming through his body, he pushed forward, crawling toward Rex. Bullets whizzed overhead, but he didn't care. He reached the dog's side, fingers gripping his vest, shaking him gently. "Rex, buddy, come on, talk to me." A faint whimper, a slow blink. Rex was alive. Relief barely had time to settle before Logan heard the sound of footsteps approaching from behind. "Cole, I need cover," he shouted. No answer. "Derek!" Still nothing. Logan twisted his body just enough to look back, and what he saw sent a bolt of ice through his veins. Derek Cole stood a distance away, shielded behind a crumbled wall, watching. Not firing, not moving, just watching. Something in his face was wrong. There was no urgency, no panic, just calculated silence. A sharp pain pierced Logan's shoulder. He gasped, jerking forward as a bullet ripped through his flesh, knocking him off balance. The impact sent him crashing beside Rex, his vision going dark for half a second. His head throbbed, his body felt heavy, but his mind screamed at him, "Get up, fight." Rex stirred beside him, a quiet, pained whine escaping his throat. "We have to move." Logan gritted his teeth, trying to push up with his good arm. That was when Derek finally stepped forward. Left for dead. Boots crunched against gravel. Logan's breaths came fast and shallow as he forced his head up. Derek loomed over him, expression unreadable. A shadow passed over Logan's vision as Derek raised his rifle. For one horrifying moment, Logan thought he was about to be executed. But then Derek's gaze flickered to Rex. The dog let out a weak growl, his body twitching slightly, but he was too injured to rise. Logan could barely think past the pain, but he recognized the hesitation in Derek's face. He was considering something. And then, with a quiet sigh, Derek lowered his gun. Logan's mind swirled with confusion. Why? Why had Derek let him get shot? Why had he done nothing? And why was he walking away now? But he had no time to process it. His vision blurred, his limbs gave out. The last thing he saw before darkness consumed him was Rex, dragging himself closer, refusing to leave his side. And then everything went black. The cargo plane hummed softly as it cut through the night sky, its interior dimly lit by flickering overhead lights. The air inside was thick with the scent of oil, steel, and sweat, an all-too-familiar combination for soldiers. But tonight, there was no camaraderie, no voices filling the space with weary jokes or exhausted sighs. Rex lay curled in the corner of his cage, his breathing shallow, his ears twitching at every distant sound. He was no longer on the battlefield. The heat of the desert, the acrid scent of gunpowder, the sharp commands of his handler, all of it was gone. Yet the chaos remained inside him, curling in his stomach like a sickness that refused to leave. Somewhere in the haze of his exhausted mind, he still heard Logan's voice. "Stay with me, buddy. We're going to be okay." But Logan wasn't there anymore. His tail twitched, his body tensed at the sound of footsteps approaching. A soldier knelt beside the cage, his face partially obscured by shadows. "Hey, bud." His voice was low, almost hesitant. "We're almost home." Home. Rex didn't know what that meant anymore. A family torn apart. The Carter household had always been one of quiet order. Frank Carter believed in discipline, in structure. His military background made sure of that. But now the walls of the house felt different, hollow, colder than before. When the knock came at the door, Margaret Carter knew. She didn't need to see the solemn expressions of the two uniformed officers standing in the rain. She didn't need to hear the words, "We regret to inform you," to know what had happened. Logan was gone. Her knees buckled before they could finish. Frank Carter didn't move, his hands clenching into tight fists. His face was stone, his jaw locked in a way that suggested he was holding everything in, holding everything together. Ethan, standing behind them, watched the scene unfold like a spectator to someone else's tragedy. His mother was sobbing, his father stood there like a statue, and he felt nothing, because feeling meant accepting. And Ethan Carter refused to accept this. When Frank finally turned to him, expecting something, anything, Ethan clenched his fists and looked away. "You let him go," he muttered. Frank inhaled sharply, as if struck. "Ethan, you let him go," Ethan repeated, his voice colder this time, "and now he's dead." Then he turned and walked away. A dog without a home. Rex was not greeted with honor. There were no medals, no celebrations, no Logan waiting for him at the base with a proud smile. Instead, he was led through cold corridors, past empty cages filled with barking dogs that had long since accepted their fate. The animal shelter was just a stop before the inevitable. Military dogs, who were no longer fit for service, whether due to injury, trauma, or simply being too broken, had little use. Rex's new home was a small concrete cell, a steel gate separating him from the world beyond. At first he had fought. When the handlers left him alone that first night, he had thrown himself at the gate, paws scraping against the metal, teeth bared in frustration. He had howled, a deep, mournful sound that echoed down the hall, but no one came. No Logan, no orders, nothing. The next morning he didn't move when they brought him food. He was tired, his muscles ached, his world had ended, and he no longer knew what he was supposed to do. So when they finally placed the red tag on his file, the one that marked him for termination, he didn't even flinch. An unwanted visit. Ethan Carter had no intention of visiting the shelter. His father had insisted. "It's Logan's dog. We owe him that much." But Ethan didn't owe anything to the dog. Logan had chosen Rex. Logan had trained him, bonded with him, but Logan was gone. So why did they need to bring a dog into their home? Yet here he was, standing in a cold, sterile hallway, the walls lined with metal cages, and the sharp scent of disinfectant burning his nose. The sound of barking filled the space, but one cage remained silent. Rex lay curled in the farthest corner, his head resting on his paws, his eyes half-lidded in exhaustion. His once proud stance was gone, his ears drooped, his tail barely twitched at the presence of strangers. One of the shelter workers spoke, flipping through a clipboard. "He hasn't eaten much. He's been unresponsive since he got here. Doesn't react to anyone, won't take commands. We don't think he's—" Then Ethan stepped forward, and Rex lifted his head. The movement was slow, hesitant, but his ears perked slightly. His amber eyes focused on Ethan, searching, recognizing. Ethan frowned. The worker hesitated. "That's the first time he's reacted to anyone." Ethan exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "He's just a dog," he muttered. But as he turned to leave, Rex whined, a low, broken sound, one that stopped Ethan in his tracks. He glanced over his shoulder. Rex had shifted slightly forward, his body still low to the ground, but his gaze locked onto Ethan as if waiting for something. It was almost pathetic. Almost. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, then he sighed. "Come on," he murmured. Rex hesitated, then slowly he stood. A decision made. Margaret Carter wiped at her eyes as the shelter worker handed her the adoption papers. "You're sure about this?" the worker asked, glancing at Ethan, who stood stiffly beside her. Margaret looked at her son. Ethan hadn't spoken much after leaving Rex's cage. He had simply stood there, watching, as the dog refused to take his eyes off him. Frank had been the one to break the silence. "We can't leave him here," he had said. Ethan had expected his father to make decisions for him. He was used to it, but for the first time Frank had turned to him, as if asking instead of ordering. "Logan trusted that dog with his life. If Rex trusts you, maybe we should too." Ethan had wanted to argue, wanted to say he didn't need a broken dog in his life, but the image of Rex lying alone in that cage haunted him. And so, without a word, he had nodded. Now, as the paperwork was finalized, the worker smiled slightly. "He's lucky to have a second chance." Margaret glanced at Rex, who sat by the door, his tail slowly thumping against the floor as his eyes followed Ethan's every move. "Maybe we all are, an unwanted burden." Ethan Carter stood stiffly on the front porch, hands shoved deep into his hoodie pockets, staring at the dog sitting in the yard. Rex sat motionless, his amber eyes trained on Ethan with quiet intensity. His ears twitched slightly at the distant sound of a passing car, but otherwise he remained still, watching, waiting. Ethan sighed and turned away. He did not want this responsibility. The moment they brought Rex home, his father had handed him the leash and declared, "He's your responsibility now." Ethan hadn't argued. What was the point? His father was still trying to act like they were a military family, still trying to turn everything into duty, discipline, and service. But Ethan wasn't a soldier. He hadn't signed up for this. As he stepped inside, the sound of claws scraping against the porch wood made him pause. Rex had followed. Ethan exhaled sharply, glancing down. The dog's tail didn't wag. His ears weren't perked in excitement. He just stood there, still and silent, his eyes searching Ethan's face for something. Anything. Ethan turned away. "You're not my problem." Rex didn't move. The door clicked shut between them. A restless night. Ethan lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sound of the wind pressing against the house. The glow of his phone screen lit up his face, but he wasn't really reading the messages from his friends. His mind was elsewhere. It had been a long time since his house had felt this unsettled. His mother barely spoke, her grief settling in the spaces between her movements. His father buried himself in work, pretending that silence meant strength. And then there was Rex. He had barely moved since they got home. He hadn't touched the food in his bowl, hadn't reacted to the new dog bed they had set up in the corner of the porch. He just sat, waiting. For what? For Logan. Ethan closed his eyes. He hated the thought that something as simple as a dog could grieve harder than he did. Then, suddenly, A long, haunting howl pierced the quiet night. Ethan's eyes snapped open. It was deep and drawn out, carrying an unbearable weight of loss. It wasn't just a noise, it was a cry. A chill ran down his spine. For a moment he tried to ignore it. He pressed the pillow over his ears, shut his eyes tight, but the sound continued, stretching into the night, raw and filled with something Ethan wasn't ready to name. Finally, he threw off the covers and got up. A silent conversation. The night air was crisp, carrying the scent of damp grass and cold pavement. Ethan stepped onto the porch, arms crossed against the chill. Rex sat near the fence, his head tilted toward the sky, his mouth slightly open, preparing for another howl. "Hey!" The sound of Ethan's voice made the dog stop. Rex lowered his head, ears twitching slightly, and turned. And that was when Ethan saw it. The pain in those amber eyes. Rex wasn't just sitting there, he was searching for Logan, for something familiar, for a reason to exist. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. For the first time he truly saw the dog. Not as a burden, not as a leftover piece of his brother's life, but as something just as lost as he was. He hesitated, then slowly stepped forward. Rex didn't move, but his gaze remained locked on Ethan's. The boy exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "You're not the only one who misses him, you know." Rex blinked. A second passed, then another, and then finally Rex lay down. Not tense, not alert, just resting. As if for the first time he didn't have to keep searching. Ethan swallowed, his chest tight. Without really thinking, he lowered himself onto the cold wooden porch. He didn't speak again, didn't reach out, he just sat. And for the first time in weeks, so did Rex. Dawn's quiet truce. The first rays of sunlight stretched over the rooftops, painting the sky in soft hues of pink and gold. A crisp morning breeze carried the scent of pine and damp earth, gently swaying the wind chimes by the door. Ethan stirred. His body ached from the stiffness of the porch floor, and for a moment he wasn't sure why he wasn't in bed. Then he felt it. Something warm, solid, pressed lightly against his side. He blinked, shifting slightly. Rex lay beside him. The dog's body was curled slightly, his head resting against Ethan's leg. His breathing was slow and even, the soft rise and fall of his chest the only movement. For the first time since coming home, Rex was asleep. Ethan swallowed thickly. He hadn't meant to stay outside, hadn't meant to fall asleep next to this dog. But now, as he looked at the peaceful expression on Rex's face, he felt something shift inside him. A quiet understanding. Rex wasn't Logan, but he was the only thing left of him, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The days following that night on the porch had shifted something, subtle but undeniable. Ethan no longer ignored Rex, though he would never admit that he was actually starting to care. Mornings now began with the sound of claws clicking on the wooden floor, Rex pacing by the door, waiting for Ethan to wake up. At first it was annoying, but after a while, Ethan found himself getting up earlier, just to avoid being pestered. His mother noticed. "It's good for you to be responsible for something," she had said one morning, smiling softly. Ethan had just rolled his eyes. He wasn't responsible. Rex was just there. But when his friend Sophie Alvarez came by one afternoon, things changed. Training day. Sophie had always loved dogs. Unlike Ethan, she had grown up around them, her parents running a small rescue shelter outside town. So, when she saw Rex, she immediately crouched down, clicking her tongue. "Hey there, big guy," she murmured. Rex's ears flicked toward her, his eyes narrowing slightly. He didn't move, didn't respond. "He's still adjusting," Ethan muttered, watching as Sophie extended her hand palm up, giving Rex space to decide if he wanted to approach. The dog sniffed the air cautiously before taking a slow step forward, his nose brushing against her fingers. "There you go," Sophie said with a smile, gently scratching behind his ears. Ethan crossed his arms. "Great, now he likes you more than me." Sophie shot him a smirk. Maybe because I actually know what I'm doing. Before Ethan could respond, she straightened up, dusting off her jeans. Come on, let's see what he remembers from training. What? You know, training. Military dogs don't just forget commands overnight. She grabbed a stick from the ground. Sit. Rex didn't move. She tried again, voice firmer. Sit. Nothing. Sophie frowned. Huh, he's hesitant. Ethan shrugged. He doesn't listen to anyone but Logan. Sophie turned to him, thoughtful. Have you tried? Ethan blinked. Me? She tossed him the stick. Yeah, you're the only one he trusts. Ethan hesitated before sighing and stepping forward. He cleared his throat. Sit. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, Rex lowered his haunches, sitting obediently. Sophie grinned. See? He just needed to hear it from you. Ethan tried to ignore the strange warmth in his chest. Maybe he was responsible for Rex after all. A night of memories. That evening, the Carter family sat at the dinner table, a rare occurrence since Logan's passing. Margaret had prepared Logan's favorite meal, though no one outright said that was why she made it. But the unspoken words hung in the air like ghosts, filling the quiet spaces between clinking silverware. Ethan poked at his food, feeling the weight of their silence. Frank finally cleared his throat. The guys from Logan's unit sent a letter today, he said, his voice gruff. They shared some stories about him. Said he used to talk about Rex all the time. Margaret smiled faintly. He always said Rex was smarter than half the soldiers. Ethan huffed. Yeah, well, he's definitely smarter than me. A soft chuckle passed through the room, lightening the mood just a little. Then, a sharp, sudden bark. Rex had been lying by the back door, silent for most of the evening, but now he was standing, his body rigid, ears pinned back. He barked again, deeper this time, his tail stiff. Ethan pushed back his chair. What is it, buddy? The dog's amber eyes were locked onto the door, his hackles raised. Then the doorbell rang. Ethan felt something cold curl in his stomach. Rex growled. A deep guttural sound that made the hair on Ethan's arms stand up. His father frowned, already moving toward the door. I'll get it. Rex lunged forward. Ethan barely caught him, grabbing his collar just before he could reach the door. Whoa! What the hell, man? His mother stood alarmed. Ethan, what's wrong with him? The dog never acted like this. The growling didn't stop. His muscles coiled like a spring ready to attack. His breathing was harsh, nostrils flaring, sensing something no one else could. Then the door opened, and Derek Cole stood on the porch. The unwelcome visitor. Derek's uniform was crisp, his boots polished, his stance relaxed. But the moment Rex saw him, the dog exploded into motion. A snarl tore from his throat and he lunged. Ethan barely held on as Rex jerked violently against his grip, teeth bared, eyes wild. His bark was feral, frantic, almost desperate. The shift in the room was immediate. His mother took a step back, startled. His father stiffened. Whoa! Derek chuckled, lifting his hands. Didn't expect a welcome party. Rex, stop! Ethan shouted, struggling to keep control. Rex wasn't listening. His muscles trembled, his claws dug into the wooden floor. Every fiber of his being was focused on Derek, and it wasn't just aggression, it was something deeper. Recognition. But of what? Derek chuckled again, though his eyes flickered with something unreadable. Guess he still has some fight left in him. Ethan felt the way Rex's body was shaking, the way his chest heaved with each breath. He had never seen him like this before. Something wasn't right. Derek shifted slightly. Anyway, just thought I'd drop by. Got back from deployment a few weeks ago. Thought I'd check in on Logan's folks. Frank exhaled, his expression unreadable. You're always welcome here. Ethan felt a pang of unease at that. Derek's gaze flickered to Ethan. And you must be the little brother. Ethan tensed. Rex let out a deep, warning growl. Derek smirked. That dog's got a lot of attitude. Ethan swallowed hard. Yeah, guess he does. His father shot him a look. Take him outside. Ethan hesitated before nodding, gripping Rex's collar and leading him away. The second the door closed, Rex didn't stop growling. He kept pacing, his ears twitching, his body still charged with tension. Ethan knelt beside him. "What is it, buddy?" Rex's eyes flicked towards the house, and for the first time, Ethan felt a gnawing suspicion creep in. Why had Rex reacted like that? Why did it feel like he wasn't just angry? Why did it feel like he was scared? The 4th of July. Fireworks crackled in the sky, painting streaks of red, white, and blue across the dark canvas of the night. The town buzzed with celebration. Barbecue smoke curled from backyards. Children ran through the streets waving sparklers, and patriotic songs blared from speakers set up along the main square. For most people, tonight was a night of joy. For Ethan Carter, it was the night everything changed. Rex was restless. He had been acting strange ever since Derek Cole showed up at their house a few nights ago. The dog hadn't stopped pacing, hadn't stopped watching, hadn't stopped waiting. For what, Ethan didn't know. But now, as fireworks thundered overhead, Rex's body was rigid, ears flicking at every distant noise. His tail stood stiff, his head low as he prowled along the backyard fence, nostrils flaring as if something wasn't right. Ethan, sitting on the porch, frowned. "Dude, you're acting weird." Rex didn't acknowledge him. Instead, he let out a low, guttural growl. Ethan sat up. It wasn't the fireworks. It wasn't the celebration. Rex was focused on something beyond the house, something in the distance. Ethan followed his gaze and saw a row of storage units just beyond the empty lot at the end of the street. At first, he saw nothing unusual. Just a few dim security lights flickering along the chain-link fence. Then a black SUV pulled up. Ethan's heart skipped. A second later, Derek stepped out. Rex's growl deepened. Ethan froze, watching as Derek approached one of the storage units. Another man emerged from the shadows, a figure Ethan didn't recognize, but something about him felt wrong. Then Derek unlocked the storage unit. Ethan barely breathed as he watched. Inside were crates, dozens of them, and when Derek opened one, the metallic gleam of weapons reflected in the dim light. Holish *T. Ethan immediately ducked behind the fence, his heart pounding. Derek was smuggling weapons. That was why Rex had reacted so violently to him. And if Logan had been part of Derek's unit, if Logan had been close to him, had Logan found out the truth? And if he had Derek killed him to keep him quiet? A truth too late. Ethan's hands shook as he gripped the fence, his breath coming fast and uneven. He had to get proof. His mind raced, his heart hammering against his ribs. He pulled out his phone, hands clammy with sweat, and held it up. His camera zoomed in just enough to capture Derek speaking to the other man, gesturing toward the crates of illegal weapons. Then something snapped, not a gunshot, a twig beneath his sneaker. Ethan's blood ran cold. Rex stiffened. Then Derek turned. Ethan didn't think, he ran. He bolted back toward the house, his breath ragged, Rex sprinting beside him. Behind him he heard a sharp curse, the slam of a car door, the roar of an engine. They were coming. Ethan burst through the backyard gate, nearly tripping over himself as he scrambled toward the house. "Dad! Mom!" His father appeared in the doorway, startled. "Ethan, what the—" "They're smuggling weapons!" Ethan gasped, his lungs burning. "Derek, he's working with them. I saw him. I got it on video. A set of headlights beamed through the driveway. A car skidded to a stop in front of the house. Derek stepped out, and he wasn't alone. Framing a hero. Derek's expression was unreadable as he approached the house, hands casually tucked in his pockets. Two men followed, a deputy sheriff and another man in civilian clothes. Frank Carter narrowed his eyes. "What the hell is going on?" Derek's gaze flicked toward Ethan, then with a slow, deliberate sigh, he spoke. "We need to talk," he said. "There's been an incident." Ethan stiffened. "An incident?" "Your son broke into private property," Derek continued, shaking his head. "Not only that, but he let that dog loose. Rex attacked a man on sight. Someone got hurt." Ethan's stomach flipped. "That's a lie!" he burst out. "I didn't. Rex never—" Derek cut him off. "We have a witness." He turned slightly. The deputy beside him nodded. "He's dangerous," the officer said, pointing at Rex. "It's best if we take him in before someone gets seriously injured." Ethan felt his chest tighten. No, this wasn't happening. Rex hadn't attacked anyone. He had been with Ethan the whole time, and they were framing him. They were framing Rex. Ethan whirled toward his father. "Dad, you can't believe this. They're lying. Derek is smuggling weapons. I saw it. That's why Logan—" A sharp intake of breath. Margaret Carter paled. Frank's expression darkened. "What did you just say?" Derek didn't flinch. "He's making up stories." "I'm not!" Ethan shouted. "Logan found out, didn't he? That's why he—" "Enough!" Frank snapped. His father looked at him with a mixture of shock, anger, and something Ethan didn't recognize. Not disbelief, not entirely, but hesitation. Derek sighed again. "Look, I'm not here to cause trouble, but this dog, he's a danger to people. He's been unstable since Logan passed, hasn't he?" Ethan's mother swallowed hard. "Rex has been different, but it's for the best," Derek said. Then, before Ethan could react, the deputy stepped forward and grabbed Rex's leash. Rex barked, twisting violently, trying to break free. "No!" Ethan shoved forward. "You can't take him, you can't—" Strong arms held him back. His father— "Dad!" Ethan gasped. "Please!" Frank's grip didn't loosen. His jaw clenched. His eyes burned with something raw. And then, quietly, so quietly Ethan almost didn't hear, he muttered, "Let them take him." The words slammed into Ethan like a gunshot. He went still. Derek clapped Frank on the shoulder. "You're doing the right thing." The leash tightened. Rex whimpered. Then he was dragged away. Ethan's breath came in short, sharp bursts. His father turned away. Derek walked back to his car, and Ethan Carter, standing in the doorway of his home, watched as the only thing left of his brother was taken from him. A plan in motion. Ethan Carter had never felt rage like this before. Rex was gone, not dead, but stolen, and Ethan had let it happen. No, not again. Logan had died because he didn't see the danger in time. Ethan would not make the same mistake, so he did the only thing he could. He fought back. Breaking the law for justice. Sophie Alvarez and Liam Torres met Ethan behind the abandoned train yard just outside town. The place was half collapsed, covered in rust and overgrown weeds, a perfect spot for illegal activity. "Are you sure about this?" Sophie whispered. Ethan's jaw clenched. "Derek has Rex, and if we wait, they'll put him down." Liam adjusted his baseball cap. "All right, so what's the plan?" Ethan pulled out his phone and replayed the video he had taken the night of the 4th of July. "This," he said, "is proof Derek is smuggling weapons, and I guarantee you that storage unit isn't the only place he's keeping them." Sophie frowned. "So where's the main stash?" Ethan's fingers tightened around the phone. "Dad said something last night about a hunting cabin." Liam's brows furrowed. "But your family doesn't own one." Ethan nodded. "Exactly." The truth in the woods. Night had fallen by the time Ethan, Sophie, and Liam reached the abandoned hunting cabin deep in the forest. The place looked like something straight out of a horror movie. Weathered wood, broken windows, the distant echo of an owl hooting in the dark. But parked outside, Derek's SUV. Bingo! The group crouched behind a row of trees, barely breathing as they watched Derek and two other men unload crates from a truck, and then a bark. Ethan's blood ran cold. Rex, his dog, was inside that cabin. And if he was still alive, Ethan wasn't leaving without him. The battle begins. They moved fast. Liam cut the power to the cabin while Sophie disabled the truck tires, ensuring no one could escape. "Ethan?" He went straight for Rex. He found him in a metal enclosure, chained but still standing, wounded but not broken. "Hey, buddy," Ethan whispered, voice shaking as he worked to unlock the gate. "I'm getting you out." Rex's ears perked up. Then, the unmistakable sound of footsteps. They had been caught. Bang! A warning shot rang through the air. Derek stood at the entrance of the cabin, gun in hand, eyes dark with amusement. "Well," he said, voice dripping with mockery. "Didn't expect you to grow a spine, kid." Ethan clenched his fists. "You killed Logan." Derek smirked. "And what are you going to do about it?" Then he whistled. From the shadows, two massive attack dogs emerged. Rex growled, and then all hell broke loose. Rex unleashed. The first dog lunged. Rex dodged. His body moved with precision, instinct kicking in. The second dog snapped at his side, barely missing. Ethan barely had time to react before Rex countered, locking his jaws around the first dog's throat. A brutal fight erupted. Ethan couldn't move. He had never seen Rex like this, fierce, calculating, a soldier. The second dog lunged and Rex flipped it onto its back. It was over in seconds. Rex had won. But the fight wasn't over. Derek was already running. The cliff's edge. Ethan and Rex chased Derek through the woods, the ground slippery beneath their feet. Derek was fast, but Rex was faster. The trees thinned, and suddenly they were at the edge of a rocky cliff. Derek skidded to a stop. "You don't know what you're doing, kid." Ethan's chest heaved. "Neither do you." Derek pulled out his gun. Then Rex lunged. The gun went off. A loud snarl filled the air. Rex slammed into Derek, sending both of them crashing towards the ledge. For one terrifying second, Rex dangled over the edge. Ethan's heart stopped. Derek, catching his breath, grinned. "Looks like I win." Then Rex snapped his jaws around Derek's arm and pulled. Derek screamed. They tumbled, falling into the darkness below. The aftermath. Ethan stared in horror at the edge of the cliff, his body frozen in place. Then movement. Rex, hanging onto a jagged rock, whimpering but alive. Ethan didn't think. He lunged forward, grabbing the scruff of his neck, pulling him up with every ounce of strength he had left. Rex collapsed into his arms, panting, shaking, alive. Derek? Gone. The forest was silent. Then sirens. Liam and Sophie had called the cops. It was over, finally. A soldier's homecoming. Days later, Ethan stood outside the Carter home, watching as Rex lay stretched in the sun, his tail wagging lazily. For the first time in weeks, Rex looked at peace. Frank Carter stepped outside, arms crossed. "You realize you broke at least 5 laws, right?" Ethan smirked. "Worth it." Frank chuckled. Then, after a pause, he sighed. "Logan would be proud of you." Ethan swallowed hard. He looked down at Rex, running a hand through his fur. "Yeah," he said softly. "I think he already is." The truth uncovered. The morning after the chase, Derek Cole was found clinging to a rock ledge, injured but alive. The authorities hauled him up, bloodied, furious but defeated. And with him came the truth. The evidence Ethan had gathered, his video of the weapons deal, Rex's reaction, and Derek's attempt to frame the dog, was more than enough to open an investigation. And once the first crack appeared, the entire corrupt network crumbled. Derek had been smuggling military-grade weapons to criminals for months. Logan, ever the soldier, had uncovered his betrayal, and for that, Derek had ordered his execution. It was never an accident. It was never just another casualty of war. It was murder. Now Derek would pay. The trial was swift. The evidence was overwhelming. The town, once blinded by respect for a decorated officer, now saw Derek for who he really was, a traitor, a criminal, a coward. Ethan sat in the courtroom as the guilty verdict was read, his fingers lightly brushing Rex's fur beneath the table. Justice was finally served, but nothing could bring Logan back, and that wound would never fully heal. A hero's welcome. The first time Rex stepped back into town, something incredible happened. People cheered. The same dog that had been labeled dangerous, marked for death, was now being honored. Veterans, police officers, and even complete strangers stood to applaud as Rex trotted beside Ethan, his tail held high despite the bandages on his side. The mayor presented him with a medal. The local news hailed him as a hero. For the first time since Logan's death, Ethan smiled, not because justice had been served, but because Rex had finally come home. A brother's goodbye. Days later, Ethan stood before Logan's grave. The headstone was simple but powerful. Sergeant Logan Carter, a son, a brother, a hero. Rex sat beside him, his ears perked but relaxed, his head slightly tilted, as if listening. Ethan swallowed hard. "Hey, Logan," he murmured, kneeling in the damp grass. "I guess I should have come sooner." A breeze rustled through the trees, making the flags nearby flutter gently. Ethan hesitated. His throat felt tight. "I wish you were here." Rex let out a soft whine, pressing his nose into Ethan's palm. Ethan exhaled shakily. "Rex saved me, you know. I mean, I saved him too, but I think he saved me first." A small chuckle slipped from his lips. "I get it now. Why you picked him." He ran a hand through Rex's fur, feeling the warmth beneath his fingertips. "Thanks for leaving him with me." A moment of silence passed. Then Ethan saluted, just once. Just like Logan had taught him when they were kids, and for the first time since his brother's death, Ethan didn't feel alone. A family at last. That evening, Ethan stepped onto the porch. Rex lay stretched out on the wooden boards, his eyes half closed as the last rays of the setting sun bathed his fur in gold. Frank Carter stood by the railing, silent. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Then Frank exhaled. "Your mother wants to get rid of that old dog cage," he muttered. Ethan blinked. "Huh?" His father sighed. "No need for it anymore. He's not going anywhere." Ethan stared. Then, slowly, a grin tugged at his lips. "So, he stays?" Frank didn't answer right away. Instead, he knelt down beside Rex, hesitating for just a moment before running a hand over his fur. The German Shepherd lifted his head, eyes soft, ears relaxed. Frank nodded. "He's family." Rex let out a slow, content sigh, resting his head on Frank's knee. And for the first time in a long time, the Carter family was whole again.